Santos's kick is lined up. That kick is good. He got it.
Twice in 2 days. Yes, we're back with another podcast for you guys. My name's Tom Childs, and joining me tonight is Dave Barnett.
Arrowheads
How are you doing, Dave?
Supremo, Dave Barnett.
Yeah, the Arrowheads Abroad Supremo. You've taken my nickname. I think it's done now. We had a few comments after yesterday's show. People agree with it, and that's it. I think my nickname now needs to change.
Yep. To what? I don't know. What should we call you now?
I don't know. We'll leave that up to the listeners. We're here because
The
obviously
Deserter.
The Deserter, that would do. We're here today because obviously we've got to talk about the news that just come out regarding Tyreek Hill. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go back and listen to yesterday's podcast, because we talked about a lot yesterday on yesterday's podcast. A lot of it was about me and my new job with Arrowhead Pride, but we also talked about training camp.
His
and there
status as a Judas. Yeah.
Exactly, and there was also a lot in the podcast about training camps. There was a lot of stuff on there that didn't involve Tyreek Hill. So if you're just listening to this, do go back and listen to it, because the two shows don't really tie up at all, really. So they are completely different shows. So you've got 2 hours of listening to us, or an hour and a half potentially of listening to us this weekend. So aren't you lucky? Anyways, as I said,
The luckiest. Haha.
Yep, the lucky one is Brad right now, who's in the pub because he's about to go on holiday. Yeah. It's funny actually, because we've been on standby really for 2 weeks now for this news. We made a point in our little messenger of we would stay on standby, so if this news broke, we would record that day. At least two of us would get together and record the podcast. Yeah. And secretly, I've been hoping that it would be a day that Brad was around, because I despise hosting this show. But
he does.
Lo and behold, I do hate it. But lo and behold, it's the one day that Brad can't make. Typical. So here we are. So this morning, or this afternoon for us over here in the UK, the news broke that Tyreek Hill will not be suspended for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy. What was your initial reaction when you saw that news, Dave?
Surprised.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's safe to say. The league has been, I guess, quick to punish other players for similar discretions, regardless of whether they'd been proved guilty or not before. So, yeah, it was an interesting take. I was certainly not expecting like the lengthy ban that I thought he might get originally, but I'm still surprised there wasn't a suspension of some sort, and that he can like basically immediately return to team activities, which means he's there for training camp. Yeah.
And the way it's worked is that people's expectations of the suspension or the punishment has slowly but surely worked down. But in my mind, and it sounds like in yours, that it never really got to a point where I thought there would be 0 games. The audio recording, okay, it's obviously been doctored, but I thought that one line in itself was going to be enough to warrant a suspension, and I was expecting a minimum of 2 games. So when that news broke today that he's not serving any suspension whatsoever, I must admit I was definitely taken back by it.
Yeah, shocked. I say, and I've got a few of my friends are Patriots fans, and after some of the suspensions and penalties that have been handed down to them in the past, 5-6 years, especially a suspension to a certain quarterback, got a few comments directed towards myself, saying that we got off very, very lightly in comparison.
Yeah, and I think that would be safe to say with the audio. Again, the audio was doctored, and KCTV did a terrible job of covering that particular story. And I think the media hasn't painted itself in the best light. And we were fooled by it ourselves, because we had a conversation after draft night, after the audio was released, and all 3 of us were there saying that, right, he should be released. And we were probably
not released, but certainly banned and not playing the NFL again, I think was the thing. It was a case of, I think, making sure that Chiefs didn't make the same mistake with Kareem Hunt, but also, punish the player at the same time.
Yeah, excuse me. I used the word released. That's what I meant. Sorry, because I actually wrote an article at the time how the NFL needed to protect the Chiefs in regards to Tyreek Hill by obviously banning him.
Yeah.
But,
so yeah, I think there was more along that lines, but obviously, as more has come out about it, obviously the murkier it's all becoming. I don't think anyone's the only two people that know what happened are Tyreek Hill and his ex, the mother of his son. So I don't think anyone will ever truly find out what went on. But I certainly think he was painted in a worse light than he should have been. Not that he's a saint to begin with, shall we say.
And it must be said, it is on us that we were fooled by. It's not entirely our fault. Obviously, there was a third party in this, and this was KCTV that did edit that audio, and we were fooled. And maybe we jumped the gun a little bit, which I will take ownership of.
I think everyone was the same in that regard. I didn't see anyone defending him at the time. To be perfectly honest, I think if you looked on any of the sort of Chiefs related sites, a lot of the NFL related sites, I think a lot of people were saying, if not, the majority of people were all saying the same thing. And it's only since this extended audio has been released that opinions have changed. Obviously, there's still some people that are very skeptical, and understandably so. I get it, but I certainly of the mindset of, innocent until proven guilty, and until you have some solid evidence to say otherwise, I just don't see how you can throw the book at him, really.
So how do you think the NFL handled it? Because you can't say that they haven't been thorough. This first started in March, and obviously you saw how quickly they dealt with the Kareem Hunt thing. Obviously they had video to lean back on, so it was slightly different. But this story broke in March, and now we're sitting here the 19th of July. So we've gone 4 or 5 months now since this story come out. And so overall, do you think the NFL and the Chiefs have handled this quite well? Well,
I think it helps that it's the off season. Obviously the Kareem Hunt thing, sort of all that came out during the middle of the season. Similar issues before have happened in season. I think if I mentioned the Tom Brady one before, if you go and look back at that, it was a similar investigation where they were months putting together evidence and whatever like that. And I think, that again, because that happened in the off season and it sort of fell at the right time, probably, as sort of, callous as it might sound to say something like that, but the investigation came at the right time for the Chiefs and the NFL, because there wasn't really a lot else going on, so that they could take their time with it. They weren't having to immediately, because if that had happened in season, Hill would have missed a bunch of games and wouldn't have played until it had been sorted out.
Yeah, true.
Whereas now it's not really. Yeah, he missed a couple of OTAs. That's not a big deal. So yeah, it's actually probably worked out better for everyone in the long run.
Because when the audio got released, it was draft night. It was during the spectacle, and the Chiefs were very quick to say they weren't going to jump the gun. They obviously suspended him from team activities.
It was the night before, wasn't it? I think. And yeah, I think what probably was as damning was that we went out and drafted a receiver in the second round as well. It just was all pointing towards he's messed up, basically. Everything pointed towards he's messed up.
You almost put 2 and 2 together there.
Exactly, yeah. It was like how the Chiefs attacked the draft kind of gave you an idea of what they were thinking. And so, yeah, for that to happen, and then it, turns out, actually nothing's going to happen from it. It kind of weird, because you look at the Chiefs' offense now, and it was scary already, and now it's just ridiculous.
Yes, it's speed. I think is the name.
Yeah, who are you going to cover? You got Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, Travis Kelce, McCole Hardman. Good luck. That's all I can say.
I actually saw a tweet from one of my new colleagues at Arrowhead Pride. Sorry to jump that.
There we go. Yes.
I thought I'd throw one in there, just
My good friend at Arrowhead Pride.
It was from Craig Stout, and he tweeted out that if the Chiefs lined up in week 1 with 10 personnel, with Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, Byron Pringle, Mecole Hardman, and Damian Williams, the average 40 time of that group is 4.39 seconds.
Yeah, it's pretty fast, isn't it?
Yeah. Good luck covering that. So
but yeah, I don't think anyone's taken Byron Pringle ahead of Travis Kelce in that situation. No.
So before we get on to how it affects the offense going forward, how do you reckon this news is going to be received outside of the Chiefs' kingdom? Because obviously we've monitored this story so much closer than everyone else. So when my friends talk about it, they think Tyreek Hill's a scumbag, he's going to get suspended for the year, the Chiefs aren't going to do anything, he deserves a suspension. And I do say to them, just read a little bit, just investigate, don't go completely digging. But as soon as you read a little bit, it's not quite as bad as it first made out. I was like them, not to that extreme, but I was like them a few months ago. But the more you read about it, the more educated you are about this story, the more you realise it's not black and white by any means.
No, exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing is you do have to look at it and be like, okay, everything isn't quite what it seemed up front, but as I say, we followed this more closely. Just from the reaction from a few of my friends earlier today, they were a little bit shocked, and you can imagine some fans of certain teams, take example the Cowboys, with what happened with Zeke, despite the fact nothing was actually proving against him. They're probably going to look at this situation and be like, how's this come about? How has he not been punished? But yeah, it is one of those situations where you do have to say to people, read into it a little bit more, see what other people are saying, because it doesn't sort of tell the full story.
If you looked at a timeline of this, and only a timeline, you would come to your own assumption that he is definitely guilty and warrants an Olympic suspension.
I say it's just obviously it's not going to be well received, and I think at the end of the day, there's not really anything you can do about it. It is, to quote Love Island, it is what it is. The league's made their decision now. The Chiefs were proactive. I don't think anyone can criticise the Chiefs in this regard. They were proactive, banning him from team activities immediately. They did their due diligence, and I say now the league's made their decision. I don't think anyone can look upon the Chiefs and say, they've done anything wrong in this situation.
How much do you think timing comes into it? Because last week Ezekiel Elliott obviously was found that he wasn't getting a ban. Today they've said that Tyreek Hill isn't getting a ban, and obviously the league at the moment is currently discussing the new CBA. Do you think that has an effect on the outcome at all? That's me being Mr. Pessimistic, but do you think that probably played a factor a little bit?
Maybe, but at the same time, I think like the kind of certainly under a microscope at the minute, with after a couple of the previous incidents where teams were wondering what the hell was going on, with sort of suspensions and fines and whatever and penalties that were handed down. So I feel like potentially it's a case of the league trying to go balance the scales back in the other direction a little bit, potentially, and as I say, technically he hasn't broken anything, any league rules. So it's like, what do you get him for? That's the thing.
I just struggle with the language used on the audio. Just that one line. I struggle to believe that if this happened last year or the year before, that he would come out with this without a suspension, because of that one line, because if you have to look at Jimmy Smith, obviously he made threats before, and obviously you have to take context because it was an audio, and we've now heard the extended audio. But I am surprised, really surprised that they didn't throw 2 games at him just for the audio alone.
Yeah, I would have thought potentially they'd have looked at it as, I guess, bringing the league into disrepute, or putting the league in a bad light, something along those lines, where they could have got him on some sort of technicality, even though he hadn't really, they couldn't really prove anything. So, I'm surprised, but as I say, I feel like, it's probably a case of trying to balance the scales back in the other direction a little bit.
So we move on. Tyreek Hill is not serving a suspension at all at the moment. They have said that if any more news comes out regarding this case, they will address it. But as it stands, and with the information we've got, Tyreek Hill is not serving a suspension. He's back to team activities next week. The training camp starts a week on Saturday. He's there. So we touched on it earlier. How does this affect the wide receiver room and the plan for the offense going into 2019?
I think who was it? You that made the bet with me last night. I'm looking forward to receiving that £20 off you. Let's say that much.
Well, regarding Gronkowski.
Oh shit! No. What was that? Oh, I thought we made a bet on Sammy Watkins. No, my bad.
We made a bet on Gronkowski, mate.
Yeah, never mind.
You're trying to hustle me. I listen to these shows back. I know what we talk about.
I say a lot of shit. I don't remember half the stuff I say on these shows. I just remember we made a bet and you mentioned something about Sammy Watkins getting 1,000 yards.
I said Sammy Watkins would get 1,000 yards.
He's not going to now, I don't think, if Hill is available for all 16 games. It basically everyone just drops down in the pecking order because Hill, outside of maybe Travis Kelce, who gets his looks anyway, but everyone else is just a little bit further down the pecking order. And you know what? I honestly think this spells the beginning of the end for Watkins
unless he does something special.
Unless he does something special and something else happens with Hill, because technically he's only got 1 year left on his deal. I feel like with Hardman now sort of not having to be rushed as much, gives him more time to develop this year and step into the number 2 role next year. I
think he's the biggest benefactor of all of this, to be honest. I think Sammy Watkins is probably the biggest loser and Mecole Hardman's probably the biggest winner, because now there is no expectations for Mecole Hardman. A few months ago when he was drafted to play a position because Tyreek Hill was
basically to replace Tyreek Hill. That everyone was going to expect Hardman to basically be a like replacement for Hill, and it just removes a ton of expectations off his shoulders, and it's just like, whatever he does now, it's not going to be scrutinised quite the same.
Sammy Watkins is under the cap for $19 million this year. Obviously, he's expected something quite similar the year after, but we can cut him without taking a hit too much next year.
What does Sammy Watkins, isn't it? I think we.
What does he need to achieve this year?
I don't think it matters.
Really?
I genuinely don't think it matters. Especially if the Chiefs tie down Hill to a long-term deal. There's no way. And the thing is, Hill's probably not going to get quite as much money as he would have done 6 months ago. He'll still get a good chunk of money, but I don't think he'll get quite as much. But there's no way you're going to be paying 2 receivers $40 million e cap space. It's just you can't do it. I think regardless of what Watkins does this year, I think it's probably his last year in KC.
Yeah, enjoy it while it lasts, everyone. Because
get him a Super Bowl ring, send him off on his way. Yeah, everyone's happy.
Yeah, because I do like Sammy Watkins, and I do think it made a difference when he was on the field last year.
Yeah, for sure.
If you just looked at the box score, you probably think that he was a waste of space, but he really wasn't. He did open things up for it. And in Sammy Watkins and Tyreek Hill, you've probably got the best duo, along with Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham in the league.
I mean, I don't think there's a better overall set of receivers in the league when you look at the group as a whole. You got DeMarcus Robinson as your 4th choice wide receiver. and probably your fifth, sixth option on the offense, because then you've got to throw in, Travis Kelce and Damian Williams, and then you've got Darwin Thompson, the rookie running back, out the backfield as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's, we've not even talked about a guy like Dieter yet, who's a favourite of Mahomes, and then obviously Pringle, who you mentioned before. That receiver room's just stacked, and if the offensive line holds up this year, 50 touchdowns is certainly not out of the question again, I don't think.
Life just got a little bit harder for the Jags, the Raiders, the Ravens, and the Lions. Teams that are probably expecting a suspension of 2 to 4 games, and they're probably looking at their early season games thinking they stand a chance here if Tyreek Hill isn't playing. But we're going to see Jalen Ramsey versus Tyreek Hill once again, which was a fascinating matchup last year. I would say Jalen Ramsey probably edged it, but Tyreek Hill grew into his role a lot better and is getting better as a receiver as week on week.
Yeah, the thing is, like, in a situation like that, it just means someone else is open.
Exactly.
And that's the thing, that's the case with anyone like that. If you really are going to try and bracket guys, like teams have tried to bracket Kelce and teams have tried to bracket Hill, play man and play a safety over the top, it just means someone else is going to be open.
Yeah.
You can't cover everyone, and it's even more true now with the additions. So I'd hate to have to try and scheme to defend that offense. It's going to be disgusting.
The AFC Championship game was a perfect example of that. In the first half, Bill Belichick really made a point of stopping Tyreek Hill, and he continued that into the second half. But by half time, Andy Reid and Mahomes had figured it out. And so in the second half, look at the difference. And if teams are going to try and to stop Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill or Sammy Watkins, someone else will be open. And Andy Reid is the master. Pat Mahomes is getting smarter. Like this offense is going to be genuinely scary. And if you pair it with a half decent, let's say half decent, if we can get their defense, then I just don't know of a team in this league that is set up to beat the Chiefs as they are right now.
And as I say, it's just like, this is the insane thing. We're talking about Mahomes as if he's been in the league like 10 years and he's a third-year starter, which just makes it even more... Sorry, second-year starter, third-year player, which just makes it even more insane that he's able to do what he can do at this age. And it's just, the future looks bright, very, very bright.
Speaking of the future, I'm going to ask this question. Some people might say it's insensitive asking this now because obviously it is obviously a very touchy subject, and but Tyreek Hill, as on his current trajectory, and the way he's played, regarding all the stuff that's obviously come into play, all the things we know about college and what happened in college and what's happening now. His play alone and the way he carries on will get him into the Hall of Fame. Do you think it will be held against him if he carried on like this?
No. I mean, there's players in the Hall of Fame that have done worse. Allegedly. Yeah. Allegedly.
A certain linebacker.
Allegedly. So, I don't think. Nobody will remember this in 10 years' time if Hill stays out of trouble and carries on the trajectory that he's on at the minute. It'll be forgotten about.
So I think we're going to wrap it up. One last thought is that obviously there's been investigations going into this, and there have been very thorough investigations by obviously the DA, the CSE, is it, the Child Services in America, and obviously the NFL. And the general outcome from it is that it was an accident that injured Tyreek Hill's son's arm. So that is a pleasing aspect of it, obviously, because underneath all this sports story and obviously the suspension story, the underlying factor is that there was a little boy that people thought had come to harm in his own home. And thankfully the conclusion seems to be that it was an accident and he isn't under harm. Okay, their relationship might be toxic and that will affect the child in other ways, but in the aspect that people were talking about and the accusations going around, it seems that they weren't true, which has to be seen as a positive.
For sure. I say, like, as much as we all love football, it's secondary to to other stuff. So of course it's always positive to hear that kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and you just hope for his sake that the two of them can sort it out.
Yeah. I think we'll leave it. Excuse me. I've lived to cough for the last 2 minutes. I was just really holding it in. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you for making yourself available for me, Dave. It's nice to hear that you're not ripping into me like you were constantly for 4 minutes.
You said this had to be a serious podcast, so I was serious.
Yeah, but do go back.
But it's over now, so
get out. When's Love Island?
Go
back and listen to yesterday's podcast. We do talk about training camp, obviously. We made a couple of bets in there. It's a fun show, so go and listen to that. But I want to thank you all for listening to us. I hope you enjoy your weekend. And from one kingdom to another, we'll speak to you again soon.